Working from home has been a trend that's been steadily growing in recent years as an alternative to physically commuting to the workplace. But the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has made remote work a necessity for many companies, as physical gatherings need to be avoided while maintaining business as usual. And now corporate leaders are considering keeping telecommuting policies even after the pandemic. Now, while most of us won't miss getting up early and squeezing onto a rush hour train, there have been mixed opinions on whether the comfort of home actually leads to better work or a less stressful working experience. Today, we discuss how telecommuting is impacting our ability to work productively at home and also maintain that healthy work-life balance. For this, we're joined by Susan Whitbourne, Professor Emerita of Psychological and Brain Sciences at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and an author at Psychology Today. Thank you so much for joining us from Boston.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you, Si-Young.
It's lovely to meet you. And we also have Graham Webb, Fellow at the School of International Studies at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. It's good to see you again.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Well, let's start with you, Susan. So as COVID-19 forces many people to work remotely, how does the change in physical location and space affect our psychology?
We're very much affected by the physical environment in many aspects of our life that we don't even realize until our environment changes, which of course it has changed radically. I mean, it was nice to be able to work from home on the occasional reason not to go in day, or maybe the casual Friday, but when every day is work from home, it does create a very different mindset about your work, yourself, and of course, the way you feel about the people that you're not seeing on a daily basis.
And Susan, does the ability to focus at home really differ from person to person? And how is productivity actually affected by working remotely?
People are very differently in their ability to focus. And what it takes is really a firm commitment to setting the kind of schedule that you would set at the workplace. In some ways, you can be even more productive because there aren't those hanging around people at your door trying to get them out of the way so you can get back to your desk type of situations. But you have the equivalent of that in all the people around you and your pets and laundry and everything else, cooking, you name it, that has to be done at home. So what it takes to focus is a firm commitment on focusing, setting schedules, setting boundaries for yourself, and then rewarding yourself for being good by then taking a little time off to hang out and do the other things at home that you were tempted to do before.
So as you just mentioned, it really does take discipline and that commitment, which is something I really don't have at home, especially as I work from the kitchen, always going back and forth with snacks. But, well, Graham, how has remote work actually affected productivity for companies that have introduced the policy?
Well, the anecdotal research, the surveys that are coming out through various reports indicate that productivity levels have either remained the same pre-pandemic and in some cases have actually increased. But I think it's still early days, and I really concur and align with Susan's views on this because there is the productivity gains or the preservation of productivity in a work from home setting may probably come at some kind of price to the individual, because now there is no switching off from work, and so work demands in a way have increased. It's true that the individual now, the onus is on the individual to organize his or her time a lot more effectively and to take ownership of that. But there again, because of the demands today for companies to stay afloat and to survive in an ever-competitive marketplace, these burdens passed on to employees will probably come at some kind of impact, in terms of the welfare of the individual. So, from my point of view, at least, I think that it's still early days. We're looking at some positive signs at the firm level, and perhaps we will see some of these effects on a national economic level. But in terms of the individual, I think still remains an open question.
But for the businesses, has it been beneficial for them in terms of productivity?
Definitely. I mean, I personally double hat. I mean, I'm both an adjunct assistant professor and also a person who works with one of Singapore's largest technology firms. I manage a team, and I've personally seen the changes at hand. I mean, these changes are necessitated by the fact that companies have to cut costs or else perish, actually, and have to close shop completely. And so, shifting to a work from home policy has been highly beneficial for firms in cutting overheads, keeping operating costs down. But once again, I think these shifts are still unfolding, and the impacts remain to be seen. I mean, on one hand, there are some productivity gains, but on the other hand, I think in terms of some of the intangibles like work culture, cohesiveness with your colleagues, the nature of leadership, for example, and also things like your identity with the firm. I think these are things that are shifting as we speak, and so it's going to be interesting to see what kind of workplace we're going to end up being in, and how professionals see themselves, in this sort of context.
So you just mentioned the intangibles there that really do add to the work culture and the dynamics of productivity. And well, Susan, what are the aspects of working in the office that are beneficial for us both emotionally and socially as we work?
The most important, I think, is social support and the bonding that you have with your fellow employees, assuming that you get along with them. Now, it's possible work from home could be a great relief if you're trying to escape a bullying boss, a tyrannical boss who is constantly looking down over your shoulder. So there is that kind of relief that comes from escape. Unfortunately, those are the bosses that are sending you emails at all hours of the day and spreadsheets with 35 tasks to be done, and why aren't you done yet? You've got all this time. So yeah, I mean, that's the trade-off between the kind of fellow employees you have and the kind of supervisor you have. It all comes down to some of those details.
And well, Graham, you just mentioned that working from home does incur some costs for the individual worker, and this can even include utility fees for one. I mean, especially during the summer when it's hot, we use a lot of air conditioning. I mean, that's one of the small elements that really add to the bill when we're working from home. So do you think, as a result of working from home, that employees are really getting the short end of the stick?
Well, I've been thinking about this question. I think it's very difficult to get to arrive at some sort of inherent truth about, in terms of the answer to the question. On the one hand, it appears as if employees are getting the shorter end of the stick. It's true. The increasing costs on your utility bills and other sort of bills you have to pay from working from home have dramatically increased, and this places a burden on households. And I think these impacts do count. But on the other hand, I think the subtle proposition being placed on employees are about having to chip in cost cutting, in contributing to the bottom line, in order to keep their jobs, right? So everyone has to sort of make their contribution to make sure that companies stay afloat, so that companies can keep people underemployed, and employees somehow have to sort of pick up some of the slack. So I think this seems to be the social compact, if you like, between employees and employers, at least from what I see in some firms in Singapore. But I think at some point, as soon as the economy recovers more significantly, I think firms and employers will be expected to help to offset these costs that individuals are now carrying for the long term, because I don't think that's going to be quite sustainable. Employees are feeling the impact of this, and even though they're willing to stomach it for the short to medium term, I think for the long term, I think it's going to be a new arrangement will have to be set up in order to have this sustainable, new environment.
And it does seem like a lot of workers are really working. They're working after hours. They're doing a lot of overtime these days, and they're really finding it hard to switch off. So, Susan, how should people really separate that, work and life elements at the home?
Well, I think another aspect to point out in terms of separating work from home just goes back to the demands that you're getting really from both sides. I've just read some research about autonomy, and this is research on sort of worker mental health and stress and strain. And there's a long history of research in psychology of occupations that loss of autonomy leads to greater stress. Whether that loss of autonomy comes from somebody at home demanding too much, i.e. your family, or from the boss demanding too much, workers need to have a sense of autonomy and internal sense of control. And there's many studies showing the detrimental effects on health of not having control over your work conditions. The lower your social class, the lower your control, the harder it is on your health. So we have to avoid that at home. We have to find a way to express ourselves, to feel that we're doing what we want to be doing, and that we can also turn off and turn on as best fits our own personal needs and schedules, while recognizing the needs and demands of other people when they're reasonable.
So even though the line's very blurry on when you can actually switch off and stop sending your emails or stop checking your emails, it's quite important to be firm, even with your boss, I suppose, in terms of your maintaining that divide between work and your personal life. And well, Graham, so do you expect this trend to continue? Do you expect telecommuting to stay a permanent trend even after the pandemic?
Well, I hesitate to answer that question with any degree of confidence because I think it's still early days. On the one hand, I think the economic arguments are quite well-founded. I mean, in terms of keeping costs down, helping companies to stay afloat and to recover in the least, and also to thrive and grow in terms of their revenue and their profits and whatnot. But on the other hand, I think we can't discount the role of culture. We've seen, for example, not just in Asia, as you know, in Asia we have a very communitarian sort of ethos where gathering in groups, it's important, not just in the private setting, but also in the work setting. So showing up at work is something that I think employers and firms in many parts of Asia still demand of their employees. In Singapore, we've had to put in very strict regulations to prevent that from happening because bosses were still running against the grain and demanding people to come into work despite the lockdowns that we had, and people had to be penalized for that. But we're also getting reports coming out from places like the United Kingdom. I mean, we read a recent report, the British government, various government officials have been trying to increase the pressure on having people come back to work, to populate city centers, which are otherwise being vacated because, especially if you work in a country that runs a financial hub. In Singapore, we have a financial hub as well, and it's literally a ghost town. So I think this needs to be squared off somehow. And I think on a cultural level, I think there's some tension there. So I think there might be a risk of us reverting back to the mean again if we somehow don't square some of these issues off. And I think they're still being worked out, so to speak. But I think the coronavirus, of course, is blind to all of this. And I think if we were to have yet another surge of infections, I think that would probably discipline the outcome and compel people, and employers in particular, to stick to a work-from-home policy.
Well, it seems that many employers, they are considering keeping telecommuting a permanent option. And Susan, if this is true, then what should employers then really do to accommodate the needs of their workers in this new normal of remote work?
Well, I think one of the lessons that could come from this is that workers need a work-life balance, a work-family balance. A lot of times that stress falls more on women, at least in America, who are responsible for juggling everything. But employers maybe need to hear now what employees are saying about, I like a flexible schedule that I can determine. Now, mandatory flexible schedules are not appreciated particularly, but voluntary ones have that beneficial effect of allowing people to squeeze in their important family duties without feeling, kind of torn at from all different directions. So I think employers need to learn from this. What was it that workers liked about this period? How can we accommodate their need for work-life balance more successfully. And I think that would be a very positive outcome. Everything else set aside, of course, but psychologically in terms of workplace adjustment.
Well, I'm afraid that's where we're going to have to wrap up the discussion today. But that was Dr. Susan Whitbourne in Boston and Dr. Graing Webb in Singapore. Thank you so much for joining the programme today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time here in Korea. Have a good day or evening wherever you are. Goodbye.